Hello, welcome to our final week of the course Elements of Literature and Creative Communication. Well, if you can quickly recall, we began this week with discussing Indian drama, origins of Indian drama, and we identified Bharata's Natya Shastra as the first text, that describes various features of Indian drama and all that, including origin of drama according to Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. We identified rasa theory and how rasa theory contributes not just to the field of drama, but to various other fields of performative arts and things like that. And we had also said that we would be discussing an Indian play in English, and this is the play Hayavadana, Girish Karnad's Hayavadana. I'm sure you must have read the play by now. If not, of course, it's never too late, right? Please read the play. But we would initiate the discussion of that. Girish Karnad's Hayavadana is a very, very important play, not just in the tradition of Kannada literature, because first Hayavadana was written in Kannada and later translated by the playwright himself into English, but how the very category of Indian drama in English is slightly problematic, and in order to get a better picture of that, we said that Rakesh Mohan in Hindi, you have Badal Sarkar in Bangla, and you have Vijay Tendulkar in Marathi, and of course Girish Karnad in Kannada, writing their plays in the regional languages and how they get translated into English, and how together you get a composite field such as Indian English drama. Okay, so this is again a play in translation. Let's go ahead and take a look at the play Hayavadana by Girish Karnad. Yeah, before that, of course, a little background about Girish Karnad. Girish Karnad is one of the, remarkable Indian English playwrights, and he is honored with Jnanapith Award, of course, the highest literary honor in India, and of course, he has also been bestowed with the Sahitya Academy Award and all that. Girish Karnad is not an unfamiliar name to many of you, or it's not an unfamiliar face, because you will have seen him in many popular Bollywood movies, including Ek Tha Tiger, right? He is a well-known actor and also film director, playwright, and a Kannada thinker. Some of his very well-known plays include Taledanda, Tughlaq. In fact, Tughlaq happens to be one of the very well-known plays to have been prescribed on the syllabus of Indian drama and theatre. Therefore, Tughlaq we have here, and other plays include Vadakalu Bimba, Yayati, and other works. Okay, so let's quickly take a look at the play and all that. In fact, needless to say that he is one of the remarkable playwrights that we have, and therefore his plays contribute in a significant way to furthering Indian English drama and its interests. Okay, when somebody asked him, what writing plays meant for Girish Karnad, especially in the post-independence India, he said not just for him writing plays or engaging in any literary production in the post-independence India for his contemporaries meant something like this. He said, "My generation was the first to come of age after India became independent of British rule. It therefore had to face a situation in which tensions implicit until then had come out in the open and demanded to be resolved without apology or self-justification." What kind of tensions, you could ask? Tensions between the cultural past of the country and its colonial past, between the attractions of the Western modes of thought and of our own traditions, and finally between the various visions of the future that opened up once the common cause of political freedom was achieved. So this is in general the kind of historical, socio-political background in which Girish Karnad's plays unfold, and also writings of many of his contemporaries. This is a beautiful philosophical statement, that can give us an insight into the literary production in India, especially post-independence. Okay, well, Hayavadana is a play that was originally written and published in Kannada in 1971, a very small play, about 2-act play, and of course it had its premiere in Bangalore in 1972, and this remarkable director B.V. Karnad, of course, directed its first production. And the play itself draws upon several Indian tales and Western tales. To begin with, Girish Karnad said that one of the indelible influences on him was Katha Saritsagara, especially, Betala Panchavimshati Katha, one of the tales from there. You must have heard of the well-known Vikram Betal stories. So one of the stories from there played an important role in shaping this particular play as such. More than that, in fact, Thomas Mann's Transposed Heads, a short novel written in 1950. Of course, that itself is based on Katha Saritsagara, and this play is closer to the spirit of this particular novel than to a tale from Katha Saritsagara, and therefore Karnad acknowledges the primacy of Thomas Mann's Transposed Heads, the primary influence of this particular novel on our play Hayavadana. And now there are a lot of parallels between Transposed Heads and, of course, Hayavadana. To begin with, Transposed Heads also talks of a kind of a love triangle. Of course, that's a very dramatic term, but it's a little more than that, wherein you have two close friends. In this particular novel by Thomas Mann, you have Sri Dhaman and then Nanda, very close friends, but who belong to different backgrounds. And you have Sita, who is equally drawn to both of them in different ways. Though she marries Sri Dhaman, later she develops some kind of attraction towards Nanda, and what kind of complications it leads on to, and how towards the end of the novel they have to, of course, they behead themselves. So similarly, you have in Hayavadana too, we have two protagonists. That's the main plot. Of course, Hayavadana is a rich, layered play. Please remember that. One of the threads of the play is, of course, an adaptation from or influences from Transposed Heads, and Karnad extends this particular play by adding various subtexts and all that. That's something very remarkable. Even here you have Devdutta and Kapila, and you have Padmini, and Padmini is initially drawn to both of them. Both of them marries Devdutta, and the plot slightly thickens, but she is unable to overcome her attraction towards Kapila, and Kapila too in a certain way reciprocates there. But when Devdutta comes to know of it, what does he do? He goes and offers his head to Kali, thinking that let his beloved Padmini and, of course, his close friend, let them live a happy life. And when Kapila goes in search of Devdutta, he finds Devdutta having sacrificed his life. Of course, Kapila is a very close friend of Devdutta. He too almost kills himself before Kali, offers his own head. Then when Padmini comes, looking at their friendship and looking at her, not a very enviable state or enviable condition, she too is about to kill herself. That's when Kali appears and blesses them. But the play doesn't end there. In fact, the play goes ahead and says that, it's a remarkable tale. Kali gives Padmini an option, don't worry, I'm pleased with your devotion. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a kind of a blessing, you please put the heads back to the bodies and I'm going to grant them life. Now, in that confusion, in that eagerness, in that anxiety, or maybe, we don't know what other subconscious forces are at play here. Well, Padmini misplaces the head of, Kapila with the head of Devdutta, and places Kapila's head on Devdutta's body and Devdutta's head to Kapila body. Now, then what happens is now the crux of the play. This is in a nutshell the play. We need to know that so that we can carry out our critical discussion. Please remember, this is just a surface. We have just scratched the surface of the play. So assuming you know the story, if you stop reading, well, it will definitely not do either of us any good. Please go back and read it. I've just narrated that element of story which is essential for our critical discussion. All right, let's go ahead and discuss the play in a little more detailed manner. Well, an active understanding of the play and a critical discussion of the play also helps us understand various features of Indian English drama and the continued legacy of Indian English drama or Indian drama, especially classical Indian drama, even in Indian English drama. Of course, one of the remarkable features of Indian drama is we begin with the play here, or any dramatic production begins with a prayer to God. It's an invocation, right? Most of the times it plays a ritualistic purpose because we pray, especially Vigneshwara. He is the god of success and perfection, so that during the dramatic performance, no vigna, no obstacle comes and stops the play. Therefore, that's also a ritual. But in this play, this also acts as a frame. This also acts as a kind of a subplot. That's very, very interesting. How does it act? Of course, we can discuss it later. Well, generally, what happens here is you have Bhagwata or Sutradhara, who is a kind of a miniature version of the Greek component of chorus. We also have replica of chorus in Indian drama, but not in that sense. So a part of the functions of chorus is performed here by Bhagwata. So he comes and prays Ganesha. Now, this is a remarkable prayer because it's not just a ritualistic, prayer, but if you don't read this very carefully, you miss how this particular prayer beautifully and very dynamically interacts with various layers of the text. Therefore, let's go ahead and also begin our discussion of the play with a prayer. O elephant-headed Heramba, whose flag is victory and who shines like 1,000 suns. O husband of Riddhi and Siddhi, seated on a mouse decorated with a snake. O single-tusked destroyer of incompleteness, we pay homage to you and start our play. This is how, of course, Bhagwata begins it. I've slightly highlighted it. Please take a look at this. Destroyer of incompleteness. Why have we highlighted? Because the play is all about the concept of human, incompleteness, identity, subjectivity, and of course, our pursuit after perfection and our constant, we are driven, the entire humanity is driven by a sense of attaining completeness. In the face of incompleteness that defines our life, in the face of incompleteness that defines our life, we are constantly yearning for some kind of completeness, and maybe as a way to reach there, we begin our journey with a prayer to God, something like that. And this beautifully interacts with the characters. There are various characters who are absolutely cribbing about their own incompleteness, and this particular prayer beautifully interacts with that. Okay. Now, that's the question, why do we invoke Ganesha in this particular play? Is it just ritualistic, or does it serve any better purpose than that? That's a question, of course, you can later answer. Okay. Yeah, let's, in fact, what we have done, we unfold the narrative using various characters here. There are various characters in the play, and let's try to unravel the plot structure, the storyline, and various other vagaries that come in the play through these characters. You have Bhagwata. We have already discussed Bhagwata, as somebody, a miniature version of chorus who does very many roles, and he begins the play. Bhagwata here begins the play, and he is about to narrate to us. In fact, the Bhagwata's narration acts as a kind of a frame within which the entire play unfolds here. So he is about to narrate the main plot. Of course, there are 2-3 subplots here. We are going to discuss them. Please bear with me. So the main plot is the story that we discussed just before this particular slide, the story of Kapila, Padmini, and of course Devdutta. And whenever he is about to discuss that particular plot, he is often interrupted by another actor, because this actor is slightly, is slightly scared. When Bhagwata asks him the reason behind his fear, well, he shows him, or he indicates in a particular direction. There, to everybody's surprise, you find a character, coming. There's a half, drawn curtain, and behind that you can see a Hayavadana. It's again a character in the play. Of course, it's also the name of the play, but also the character. A character called Hayavadana comes here. It is a human-bodied guy with the face of the horse. Of course, remember, Karnad makes a rich use of Indian legends, the tales from the Puranas and things like that. The concept of Hayavadana is drawn heavily from, Hayagriva. You have the version of Vishnu as Hayagriva, where Vishnu comes in the form of, human body and the face of Haya, which is, horse. So there is a direct allusion to that particular symbol there. So here too, in fact, Karnad makes use of how do you do that on a play, because play has to be performed, right? How do you do that on stage? Of course, Karnad makes a wonderful use of masks throughout. So masks here, in fact, a character comes, an actor comes wearing the mask of a horse, indicating that he has the face of the horse, something like that. So, well, he himself has, his story is now stopped, Bhagavata's story narration is interrupted. Now, Hayavadana says that he is again, he's born to a prince who was once a horse and later turns himself into a human being, and his mother is again, a princess or a queen, and now he is born to them, but he has been cursed by the father. Therefore, he has now the body of a human being and the head of a horse, and he wants it to be complete. Now, how does he want to achieve completion? Maybe by removing the head of the horse and having a whole human body, something like that. That's when Bhagavata directs him that, please go, there is a beautiful temple of Kali and she is remarkable. Many people say that actual Kali resides there. So you please go there, maybe your wish may be completed, something like that. And he goes, and of course now Bhagavata begins narrating to us the story of Devdutta, Kapila, Padmini and others. So yeah, as I said, Bhagavata plays various roles. He is a major character. In fact, Bhagavata is on, he is in two worlds. One is the world that unfolds on the stage, the world of the drama there. He also represents the audience, because frequently you find Bhagavata interacting with the audience. Therefore, he has the best of the both worlds, the world of the audience, the world of the drama, the world of the actors and the characters there. Therefore, he acts as a kind of a go-between, all right? And as I said, various functions that are associated with chorus can also act here. He acts as a music director, a kind of a stage manager, and of course, he is the one who performs the puja, and he even offers counsel, advice to the characters, and he even offers some interesting remarks to the audience. A beautiful, dramatic technique that Girish Karnad makes use of in Bhagavata. Now, let's go ahead and meet the first, the character of the play, Devdutta. You can call them, Devdutta is a protagonist, Padmini is also protagonist, you have Kapila also protagonist. We don't know who is the main protagonist here. All of them are main protagonists, but to a certain extent, the play is slightly tilted towards Padmini. Therefore, you can call her the chief protagonist. Otherwise, all of them are protagonists here. Okay, let's go and meet this guy. In fact, this particular tale acts as, one narrative, one plot, main plot. And the plot, there is another subplot here that is of Hayavadana, right? Because he is also in search of some kind of completion and some kind of perfection. And here, these characters are also in some kind of perfection, a search of perfection and completeness. Therefore, this is another plot. So, how these two plots intertwine towards the end is what makes this play remarkable. Therefore, we can call this particular plot the first framing narrative. Now, when the play begins, we realize that Devdutta is a remarkable scholar, in fact, who has, competed against many Pandits and, of course, defeated them. A remarkable poet and a philosopher, not just in the plays. The entire play is set in a place called Dharmapura. That's the setting of the play. Not just in that particular place, but almost across the globe, something like that. And when it comes to his physical description, remember, during characterization, we also need to, describe the physical characteristic traits of the character. So here we have a very slender, delicate looking, person. but who is known for his mental prowess and emotional faculties because he's a poet, So though his body is nothing to envy about, he has an envious, mind. We need to envy the mind because he's a remarkable poet and all that. Now, when the play begins, he's slightly sulking because he has met a girl and he wants to marry her, and therefore he doesn't know what to do. All right. So that's when, of course, he comes across his friend Kapila. What I'm going to do, I'm going to narrate the story through the perspective of Devdutta, Kapila and Padmini so that you can see and connect the missing dots. All right. So now he wants to marry her, thanks to his friend who even can give up his life for the sake of Devdutta. That is Kapila we are referring to here. Kapila tells him, don't worry, my dear, don't worry at all. I'll go and find out the details, because this guy doesn't even know the details. So he goes, finds out, and then of course convinces that particular family, and now Devdutta marries that woman, and we find that her name is Padmini. Well, after marrying Padmini, of course, remember, until that point of time, he and Kapila were very close friends. They would spend their day together, the entire day together, something like that. Now, after marrying, obviously, he wants to maintain friendship to a certain extent, but not to the extent that he used to maintain earlier, because he has his love, But Kapila doesn't seem to understand it, and he wants some private, and Devdutta wants some privacy with his newly married wife. And in the process, he discovers that, Kapila has some kind of, Kapila too is drawn to his wife. To much his discomfort, Devdutta discovers that Kapila is drawn towards his wife. It's not just that. And Devdutta, when he confronts Padmini about this, Padmini, of course, she chastises him, saying that he is just being jealous and all that. But gradually, Devdutta realizes that, Padmini is also drawn to Kapila in a significant way. Therefore, what does he do? Now, he thinks a lot about them. He realizes that probably this attraction is more solid, and therefore, what does our friend Devdutta do? When they are about to, once all the three of them undertake a journey, and there, he goes towards the temple of Kali, which is, of course, in the middle of a forest, and then he beheads himself, thinking that let Kapila and Padmini live a happy life. He beheads himself. That's the Act 1. Now, let's see how the story progresses from Kapila's perspective. What does Kapila do on the other hand? Now, for Kapila, Devdutta is his life, and that's why in the play you find Kapila expressing his, his open devotion to Devdutta. He says, I will even lay at your feet my entire life, something like that. Now, once when Kapila finds out that Devdutta is in love with, Padmini, he goes to extreme efforts to convince Padmini, because when he goes and, he doesn't know the address, he puts in a lot of effort. He finds out where this particular girl's house is. He goes and knocks on the door. And when he knocks on the door, he comes across Padmini. Padmini opens the door. He too is awestruck at the beauty of Padmini, So now he realizes that probably, Padmini is very fiery and gorgeous woman, and somehow he has, a feeling, an inkling that, they may not be happy together, or, probably the pair may not be compatible with each other. That's his initial concern, but of course he doesn't give in to that hesitation. He convinces, in fact, he goes an extraordinary length to convince the family of, Padmini to, so that, they can take Devdutta as, a groom for Padmini and all this. And then, so the play proceeds like this. And now, after marriage, now Kapila understands. Now, Kapila is drawn to Devdutta. So now he continues visiting the place. Now, he understands that Devdutta is slightly uneasy, and in the process, he also understands that, Padmini is drawn to him. Now, as a good friend, what should he do? As a good friend to both of them, so what should he do, So this is the kind of a central dilemma, but he cannot also keep himself away from Devdutta. Remember, his primary loyalty, devotion is towards Devdutta, therefore he keeps meeting Devdutta. And once, of course, all the three of them have to go to Ujjain fair, for something, but the path is through a very, difficult forest. So he himself comes out with a, cart, and he's driving the cart, and Padmini and Devdutta are sitting behind. Maybe somewhere into the forest they rest, and of course that's where they come to know that there is a Kali temple close by. There is also a temple of Rudra close by, Mahakala. So therefore, here now Padmini wants to go and visit the temple of Rudra, whereas Devdutta realizes this is an opportunity for him. Therefore, what does Devdutta do? He goes to Kali temple, while these two guys go to Rudra temple. There, of course, we know in the case of Devdutta, he has killed himself, hoping that Kapila, his close friend, and his beloved Padmini may live together. Now, when Kapila doesn't find, when he returns from the temple of Mahakala, he doesn't find Devdutta there. When he goes in search of Devdutta to Kali temple, he finds his friend almost beheaded. Now he realizes what has happened, but of course, remember, he is devoted to Devdutta. He is unable to bear the grief. Therefore, what does he do? He, by invoking Kali, he too cuts himself. He too cuts his head and offers his head to Kali. He is unable to bear the grief. So this is Kapila's story. Now let's go and see what happens to Padmini. Of course, we know Padmini is the daughter of the richest merchant of Dharmapura. And when Padmini meets, remember, Padmini first meets Kapila, and it's through Kapila that she comes to know about Devdutta. She is slightly drawn to him, but of course, keeping with the stature of her family, well, of course, Kapila is, remember, the son of a blacksmith. The son of a blacksmith, there are caste hierarchies involved here, there are class hierarchies involved here. Therefore, she cannot marry Kapila. Of course, it's unheard of. Therefore, she is invariably, she marries Devdutta. And simultaneously, as I said, she is equally drawn towards Kapila, and therefore, despite her husband's, hesitations and of course, protest, she is drawn to Kapila. To a certain extent, she is drawn to Kapila. Now we know the story. Now when what has happened now, both Kapila and of course Devdutta have sacrificed their head. And now Padmini is waiting for both of them to return. Now when both of them don't return, it's already evening. So now she goes in search of both of them. She finds Kali temple, and now when she goes and sees there, what happens? She finds her husband and of course her close friend in a pool of blood. They have beheaded themselves. She in a jiffy she understands the entire scene. She is overcome by grief. She says, what has happened to her? She doesn't know what to do. Therefore, what does she do? She invokes prayers to goddess Kali, and says that she too wants to now sacrifice her life, because she doesn't want to live the life of a widow, and she also doesn't want to live the life of a life devoid of a close friend like Kapila. Therefore, what does she do? When she goes there, she also beheads herself. So something like this. All these things are happening here, and these are the various states of mind that Devdutta and Kapila are in. Therefore, in that background, they go and have already sacrificed their life. Now Padmini also goes there, and seeing both of them in the pool of blood, she also is about to behead herself. That's when we find Kali appearing. Kali directly appears, and now she is moved by the prayers of Padmini. She says, don't worry, you don't need to sacrifice your life. These are fools to sacrifice their lives. In fact, Kali does not encourage these. In fact, she calls them, these are fools to have sacrificed their life. The moment there is a problem, these idiots want to come and give up their life, hope, imagining all noble things, whereas there is nothing there, except cowardice, probably there is nothing there, and whereas I like your honesty, therefore I am going to grant you a boon. Now all that you have to do is, don't lose your heart. Now you put the head into their bodies and I am going to grant them life. Remember, it's evening already. What has happened in that confusion? Padmini places the head of Kapila, into the body of Devdutta. Please remember the physical characteristic trait of Devdutta and Kapila here. Kapila is a very muscular one. Devdutta is a very lean, frail body, and she puts to the frail body the head of Kapila, and she puts to the muscular Kapila's body the head of Devdutta, in a way. Well, Kali smiles. Of course, she understands many things, right? Because she knows the past, the present, and the future. She is a Trikalagnane, right? She is a Sarvagne, Trikalagnane. You can think of the goddess Elikrikam. So maybe she is a version of Kali, or Kali is a version of Elikrikam, something like that. Now she says, my dear daughter, there should be a limit even to honesty, right? Anyhow, whatever it is. Saying so, she grants. We don't know what honesty she is referring to and all that. That's slightly indicative. Remember, literature works through insinuation, indirect references, not, therefore you have to understand in between the lines here. Therefore, she grants the boon. As a result of this, we have, Goddess Kali granting the boon. You have a strange, confluence. We have, now you don't know who is Devdutta and Kapila, because Devdatta's body is attached to, Devdatta's body has the head of Kapila, and Kapila's head, Devdatta's head has the body of Kapila, something like this. Now you don't know who is who, and something like this, a kind of a cosmic joke it becomes, something like this. So again, you can find that, remember, during the discussion of various techniques in drama and of course fiction, we used something called deus ex machina, deus ex machina. So where is the direct appearance of the god, something like that. So Goddess Kali performs that role. It's a kind of a technique that the playwright employs too. Of course, Kali is a major character here, but also a dramatic technique. In order to serve a particular purpose, these things happen, So this is the background to the entire thing. This is what happens in Act 1. So by the end of the Act 1, we have, a kind of a confused state of affair. And now here is confused Padmini standing. She doesn't know whether to be happy or to cry, because of course she is happy because both of them have come alive. Now there is this huge confusion. She doesn't know what to do. And of course, even these two friends are also confused. They also don't know what to do. And Act 2 probably has to begin with, how do they solve this mystery now, right? Or how do they solve the next thing? We'll discuss Act 2 in the next class, all right? Stay tuned to this. It's a very interesting play, and of course, we're going to discuss very many critical issues in the next play, all right? See you in the next class.